Oh, nothing like starting your 3-day weekend out with a nice, cheery, uplifting picture. Oh, Lord. One of those movies where afterwards you want to go watch Philadelphia to cheer yourself up. I don't know what it's been with Steve Carell these last 2 years on this show. It's like he stars in some of the most depressing films I can remember. I mean, last year it was the Last Flag Flying, which was way more depressing than this movie. And then he does this one. I really think it's one of those things, kind of like I talked about a little bit with Rupert Everett and his Oscar Wilde picture last week. You get the feeling sometimes Steve Carell is like, "Hi, remember how much I made you laugh? Well, watch this." But I think it works for him because Steve Carell, I really believe, is probably the most underrated actor working today. I really like him. And I wasn't a fan of The Office, but I liked him in it. I thought he has a way with comedy that is just really unique and really natural. He was great in the Get Smart remake, and I hate remakes. But his dramatic work has always been really solid. Really, really solid. And I don't think he gets enough attention for it. I don't think people really give him the credit that he's due for just how good and understated he is. I think that's the thing about him that I really like, is that he makes everything seem so natural. The Office would not have worked with a more presentational comedic presence. It had to be someone who really felt real, as dumb as that sounds, and as carried away as that show could get. Steve Carell always kind of gave the character some grounding, and I think he does that in his dramatic work a lot. He seems like a real person. He does not feel like a person putting on a show or a person who's acting. He makes his movies feel like documentaries. This movie really felt like a documentary. Not that you ever felt like it was filmed. It wasn't filmed in like the shaky cam, or it wasn't a found footage movie or anything like that. But just the way he presented it, the way he and the young man playing his son, and I'm sorry that I cannot remember his name, Timothy, like the weird pronunciation on one of the E's. Both of them really had a very, again, natural, I'm just repeating myself, natural feel to them and their performance and their relationship, that it felt like a real father and son. I mean, it was really quite remarkable. So I've jumped ahead a little bit because I didn't do my traditional, if you hadn't heard of it. So this is a film based on a true story, apparently taken from 2 books written by both the father and the son about the same situation, about a young man who's battling drug addiction, and the father who's always kind of looking for him and trying to help him, and the kind of ebb and flow of that relationship, the kind of cycle that addicts can kind of fall into, of you're in deep, you go to rehab, you get clean, you're clean for a while, and something happens and you relapse and it's worse, and and this whole kind of peaks and valleys of the whole thing. As I said, I think the thing that I like the most about this movie is just how organic it feels. And like I say, it doesn't feel a lot of times like you're watching a movie just in the performances and all that. It really feels like it's actually happening. And I don't just mean that in the acting, but also in the way it's written and the way, the scenes are staged. It really does sound like real conversations. The problem with movies about addiction is that they have a tendency to become melodramatic, or they have a tendency to treat it like a joke. I've seen a couple of them that do that. This is the first one I've seen that I don't know how to say this, but I've known quite a few people with certain addictions here and there. Nothing as bad as this young man had, but I can't say I've been there, in the thick of it, but I've been present in situations like this. I've been on the periphery of it. In one instance, I was kind of right there and saw some of it really up close. And I can say that this film really got it. This film really told the story and told it from both sides. No good guys, no bad guys, no nothing like that. They didn't try to villainize anybody. Nobody was a perfect, flawless human being, and nobody was, an evil son of a bitch. Everybody kind of had their ups and downs. You could see when finally, when Steve Carell's character finally has had enough, and doesn't just keep repeating the same cycle that he's been repeating. And I give the guy all the credit in the world for not doing that a lot sooner, because I don't know if I would have had the patience. Of course, that's not my kid, so easy for me to say. So yeah, and yet the movie still is able to be. I hesitate to use this word because it's not the word you should really associate with a film like this. But it still manages to be, let's say, engaging. I was going to say entertaining, but that's not the right word. I think engaging is better. You're still invested in the story. It keeps you, like I say, engaged. You want to know what's happening next. You kind of have the dread of his family, like when he's cleaning. He's cleaned there for a while, and you're like, okay, this can't last. Just, we're not even... what are we at? An hour into a 2-hour movie? It's like if this is the end, or something bad's going to happen, so you're just kind of waiting for what is going to be that trigger, what's going to set them off. Yeah. So that's no small feat to remain realistic, honest to the subject matter, and yet still be engaging for an audience on a cinematic level. That's no small task from any of the creative talent that had to go into this. So yeah, I think that this one is one of the better films I've seen recently. I don't know if it's one of the best films I've seen all year, but it is one of the better films I've seen recently. That being said, I can't say I liked it completely. And my issues with it are twofold. Number one is it does drag. Now, okay, maybe this isn't necessarily a flaw. It's just the consequence of the way the story is told. As I said, the story is told very true to life. And, as I'm sure a lot of people who have had issues like this will attest, very few people go to rehab once, get clean, and they're good to go. It's a constant battle, and a lot of people end up relapsing. Now, I remember watching a thing on a couple wrestlers, and one of them said they were in and out of rehab 17 times. I mean, so it's not a one-stop shopping kind of thing. So knowing that and understanding that is the reality, and this film is very, very dedicated to showing the reality of the situation. The problem is the film as a movie, as a narrative device, begins to get locked into a ever-repeating loop, which again is the point. I mean, that's kind of like I say, it's a double-edged sword, because it's supposed to be the point of it, is that it keeps happening, just like I said, just like it doesn't realize. But from a narrative standpoint, from an audience standpoint, you feel like you're just kind of getting trapped on this merry-go-round, which that I'm sure that was the point, because I've heard, as I say that, I'm like, that's exactly how I've heard people who are in this situation, both who were the people in the addictive situation and the people who were, I'll say the victims of it, so yeah, that is exactly how they feel. So I guess in that instance, the film does its job. I guess what I'm saying is that towards the end, after like the third or fourth time around, I began to get a little bored. Now that could be because I've been at work and rehearsal all day, and it's well past midnight, and I'm kind of aching for my bed right now. So that could have something to do with it. So maybe it's not the movie's fault. But I think it could have done with some editing. I guess I think you could have told the same story and told it in the same way, and still have been honest to the subject matter and the issues involved, and maybe brought it in at an hour and a half as opposed to 2 hours. And again, 2 hours of just kind of circling. So that's that's me. I also have to say, and I've made this complaint a number of times with films like this, and it's unfortunate because I sometimes feel like I sometimes wonder, like, what would it take to please me? It's like, what does it take? I feel we're stuck with another artistic director, quote unquote, who is very interested in, choppy scenes and non-linear storytelling. We jump back and forth in time periods without any real indication. One scene will cut into another one while the dialogue is still going on, and all of this. Now, again, I don't necessarily think a lot of that is a bad thing, because at least towards I'd say for about 3/4 of the film, if you want to chop it into quarters, it helped move the film along. It kept things going. It felt fairly well paced, but it started the artsy directorial shots began to become a distraction for me, as opposed to telling me this story and letting me just sometimes just set the camera fucking down and let the scene play. You don't have to have an artsy fucking shot every other time. There's a point where Steve Carell, finds a girl on the street. He's trying to find his son, of course, and he's trying to understand kind of what life on the street is like and all this. So he goes and finds this, girl, buys her lunch, and she's kind of telling him a story. So she's telling him the story. They're in a diner, and you see Steve Carell in the mirror behind her. So he's sitting like directly across from her. There's a mirror or something, so the camera's only on her, but he's still in the shot. But the way it's framed and the way it's shot, it looks like he's sitting fucking behind her, like at another table. For a minute there, I thought he was like talking to her like over her shoulder from another table. I'm like, why is he doing that? Yeah, I don't get it. you know. And I don't think that you needed to do that. You could have just fucking put the camera down and not tried to be Mr. Artsy Fartsy director. I think we get a lot of that with this film. We get a lot of shots and music choices that I think are supposed to portray how deep and artistic the director is, and I think it takes away from the story. I really do. I'm not saying that there isn't a place for artsy shots or really well, camera tricks and all that. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying when you're telling a story in this way, doing that shit draws attention away from the story and puts it on you as the director, going, aren't I so deep and artistic? That's my take, at least in this situation. So I think the movie when all is said and done, has a decent balance. It's a good movie, a well-told movie, a very well-acted movie, but it has some directorial issues and some pacing issues that I think work a little bit against it. So final grade for Beautiful Boy. I'm going to say a B+ for this one. Again, very, very well told, and again, huge ups to Steve Carell. We got to find a way to get that man an Oscar at some point, because I think he really deserves it. I really do. I'm a big fan of his, and I'll see just about anything he's in, honestly. And he is acting his guts out in this one, and never in a way that feels like begging, So yeah, way to start out a 3-day weekend after a very long week. It's with a really depressing fucking movie. But I do have a 3-day weekend, and it should not be a surprise to anyone. I'm planning on spending some of it at the movies. So we'll see if we can't maybe get a little bit more uplifting before all is said and done. That's this one. So thanks for joining me. And as always, drive safe, and I'll see you at the movies.